What's up guys, my name is Victoria and you're welcome to my channel. Today's video is going to be all about the making of this cowl neck dress, so let's get started. So I've already laid out the tools I'll be needing for this tutorial, and also we'll be needing the following measurements. And now let's begin. So first we'll begin by drafting the pattern for this tutorial, and to do that we're going to start off by drawing a horizontal line from the top edge of our pattern paper, and we'll be taking all our vertical measurements from that line. So first I'll just go ahead and indicate the center front and that this pattern will be cut on a fold. And then I'll start inserting all my vertical measurements, starting with my shoulder to bust measurement, which is my bust point at 11 inches. Then my shoulder to waist measurement at 17 inches. And then from the waistline, I'll be going down by 8.5 inches to mark my hip line. So I'll just go ahead to mark these same 3 points on the other side before going in with my ruler to draw horizontal lines across. So I'm just squaring out my bust line, my waistline and my hip line, and then I'll be indicating what each line stands for. So right now you can go ahead to determine the full length of your dress. I'll be using 42 inches for mine plus 1 inch for hemming allowance, that's 43 inches, even though my pattern paper stopped at 39. But I'll just indicate it on the pattern paper so that I'll remember to add 4 extra inches when cutting it out on the fabric. So now that we've marked all our vertical measurements, it's time to create the neckline and the shoulder slope. And for the neckline, I'll be using 3 inches for both the neck width and depth to create a simple round neckline. So I'll be going in with my French curve to connect the 2 points together like so. And that will be all for the neckline. And now for the shoulder slope, I'm going to be marking half of my shoulder measurement at 8 inches from the center front, and from that point I'll be coming down by 1 inch before going in with my ruler to connect it to the neckline in a slant. So now that we're done with the neckline and shoulder slope, it's time to work on the armhole. And to do that, we're going to start by determining the upper chest line, which is your bust measurement divided by 6 plus 1.5. So I'm just going to go ahead and mark mine at 8 inches from the shoulder slope before squaring it out with my ruler like so. So I'm just indicating the upper chest line. And on that line, I'll be inserting my bust circumference divided by 4 so I can go ahead and create the armhole. So I'm going to be marking 1/4 of my bust circumference at 10 inches on the upper chest line. Then I'll be connecting the shoulder slope to meet the upper chest line like so. And after that, the next thing to do is to determine the midpoint of that line. So right now I'm just determining the midpoint of that vertical line, and from that point I'll be going in by 3/4 of an inch before connecting it to the bust measurement and the shoulder slope to create my armhole. So I'm just going in with my French curve and I'm connecting 3 points together like so. So now that that's done, it's time to start inserting my horizontal measurements divided by 4. I already marked 1/4 of my bust circumference on the upper chest line, so I'll be doing the same for my waist and for my hip. So I'm marking 1/4 of my waist circumference on the waistline, and I'll be marking 1/4 of my hip circumference on the hip line before connecting all the points together. So first I'm connecting the chest line to the waistline and then the waistline to the hip line. And then I'll be connecting the hip line straight downwards to meet the hemline. After which I'll be going in with my French curve to smoothen all the sharp edges, because there are no sharp edges on our bodies. So guys, now it's time to start working on the cowl neckline, and the first thing we're going to do is from the upper chest line we're going to be coming up along the armhole curve by 5 inches. So I'm just marking 5 inches along that curve, and then I'm going to be squaring that point to meet the center front. So I'm just taking the measurement from that point to the upper chest line, and I have about 3 3/4 of an inch. So I'll be marking the same thing at the center front before going in with my ruler to connect both points. And that will become the neckline for this dress. So I'm just indicating that. Before going ahead to cut out the part I won't be needing, so I'm just cutting out the part above the new neckline. So now that that's done, the next thing to do is to add seam allowance, and I'll be using 1/2 inch for my seam allowance. So I'll be starting along the armhole all the way to the very end. If you enjoyed this video so far, please don't forget to leave a like. Just hit the thumbs up button, it'll mean a lot. So now that I'm done marking the seam allowance, it's time to cut out the pattern. So guys, in order to create the cowl neck effect, the first thing we're going to do is to slash open the upper chest line. Making sure to stop just before the very end. Then we're going to be spreading that slashed line open at the center front, like so, and that is what will create the cowl neck effect. So first I'm going to be placing a fresh pattern paper underneath this block, and then I'm going to tape it together so it doesn't move. Once it's taped down, it's time to start spreading to create the cowl neck effect. Now I'll be using 2.5 inches for my cowl neck, but normally you can spread between 2 to 4 inches. And the wider you spread, the deeper the cowl neck effect. So after marking the 2.5, I'm going to go ahead and tape it down at that point, like so. And I'll also be taping down the armhole and the neck area. So when I'm done taping it down, I'm going to be extending the neck to the center front of the fresh pattern paper, just like so. Then I'll fold it inwards so I can trace out the armhole. This is somewhat going to create a facing for the front. First I'll be going down by 1.5 inches from the upper chest line, and then I'm going to trace out the armhole to meet that point. I'll also be trimming out the excess at the center front before opening it up. So when it's opened up, this is what it looks like. Remember, I stopped at 1.5, so I'm just going to cut off any excess so that when it's folded in, it aligns perfectly. So that's it for the front block. Now let's create the back. So to create the back bodice, again I'm going to be drawing a horizontal line from the top edge of the pattern paper, like so. And then I'll be placing the upper chest line of the front pattern to sit directly on that horizontal line, making sure the center front matches the center back. And then I'll go ahead to cut out the back using the front. So there won't be any zipper on this dress, and because we are matching center front to center back, it's important to make sure the edge of our back pattern paper is straight to avoid errors. So after cutting out the back pattern, I'm just going to be taking note of my waistline and my hip line, and then I'll be squaring those points out like so. So my back neckline began from my upper chest line. It doesn't have to be so, you can choose to make your back neckline deeper. I just wanted mine to be this way. So now I'm going to be adding 1/2 inch allowance along that line for the joining of the facing. So because the back pattern won't be having any zipper, I'm going to be taking in about 1/2 inch like so, just to reduce bulk and create an illusion of a dart. So I'll just hold it down with the tape, and that's all for the back pattern. So now that we have both patterns ready, it's time to cut onto fabric. So because the fabric is not stretchy, I'm going to be folding it on a bias like so. This will also give a much nicer fit. So I'm just going to lay my pattern on the fabric, and I'll be cutting both patterns on a fold. I will also be cutting the straps for this dress on a bias as well. So I'll be cutting 2 rectangular pieces 16 inches long and 1 inch wide for each shoulder. So first I'll be creating the straps before finishing the front and back neckline. And to do that, I'll just fold the strap in 2 and sew about 1/4 inch along the length before turning it inside out. And now that we have the straps ready, it's time to continue with the stitching process. For the front piece, I'll be folding the facing inwards towards the right side of the fabric, matching the armhole curves. And then I'm going to pin the point where they meet before placing my strap in between. So first I'm making sure my strap isn't twisted, and then I'm just going to place it at that point right there before going ahead to pin down the whole area. So when it's all pinned down, I'll just take it over to the machine, and I'll be sewing along the armhole on a 1/2 inch seam allowance to give it a nice finishing. And I'll be doing the same for the other side as well. After stitching, I'll trim down the allowance and snip around the area to ease the seam, and I'll do the same for the other side as well. So now I'm going to be making an understitch on the facing fabric, and I'll be stitching on the facing fabric along the armhole towards the strap, and I'll do the same for the other side as well. This will create a nice finish around that area. And now for the back piece, I'll be folding it in 2 along the neckline, and I'll be marking 3 inches away from the center back. I'll just mark that point and make a notch because that's where the back straps will sit. So in order to attach the back strap, I'll be placing the back piece to the front piece, right sides facing each other, and then I'll be pinning the straps to where the notches are, making sure it's not twisted. So I cut out this rectangular piece of fabric that I'll be using to finish off the back neckline, about 1.5 inches wide with the same length as the back neckline. So I'll be folding that piece in 2 and pinning it on the right side of the back piece along the neckline like so. So I'm pinning from one end of the neckline on top of the straps to the other end of the neckline, and I'm pinning on the right side of the back piece. So I'm just going to take this over to the machine, and I'll be stitching very close to the edge from one end to another. So after stitching, this is what it looks like. Now we're making a top stitch on the straps for the facing before flipping it over to the wrong side and sewing it down. Make sure to sew very close to the edge from one end to another. And when that is done, this is what it should look like. So I'm placing the back piece to the front, right sides facing each other, and I'll be sewing along the sides from the back neckline all the way down to the hemline using a 1/2 inch sewing allowance, and I'll do the same for the other side. So after stitching and turning it inside out, this is what the dress looks like. So what's left to do now is to finish off the hemline, and I'll do that by folding it twice inwards and sewing around the hem. And when that is done, the dress is ready. And all that's left to do is to give this a good press and finish off the front facing using a zigzag stitch. So we've come to the end of this tutorial, guys. Don't forget to like this video and subscribe to the channel if you haven't already, and I'll see you in my next video.